So what is the future for the BBC, which we all pay for, whether we use it or not? And I think in one way or another, we all use it probably subliminally. We don't even realise we're using the BBC, and we are.
Well, we got the usual suspects in, basically, to talk about this. Esther Rantzen, you must have spoken about this so many times, who thinks the privatisation of the BBC is terrible, rotten, hopeless idea. And the Telegraph's assistant commentator, Madeline, who says, yep, it's about time, the BBC is not fit for purpose and should be privatised. So we'll go to you first. That's a big step. I mean, this is a massive institution that this country actually owes a lot to. We have our rows with Auntie, you know, it has its rows with us. But why shouldn't we preserve it? Because it's part of the fabric of the country.
I don't think the BBC should be scrapped or abolished, or it should no longer exist. I just don't think that people should be forced on pain of imprisonment to pay what is essentially a highly regressive poll tax that hits poorer people disproportionately hard. Every year, scores of the most vulnerable people are thrown into jail for non-payment of the licence fee. I think that element
so improve that
has
bit.
to go.
Why extend that sort of anger to the whole of the...
But why should we have the licence fee? You know, why should that exist? And would the BBC be able to continue in its current form that it takes without the licence fee?
Do you share the government's view? And I think this is part of the punishment that might be coming into this equation here, that the BBC's biased, that you listen to the Today programme, which the government won't put ministers on anymore because they say they get unfairly treated. You watch the BBC News at 6 and 10 o'clock.
They don't come on this show either, let's be honest. But anyway.
and the government says that that's biased as well. Do you go along with that?
I think in some ways, yes. I'm a huge fan of the BBC in many ways, but I think that what it suffers from is it's obsessed with diversity, but it really struggles with diversity of opinion. Most of the people who populate the BBC, who work there, tend to subscribe to a particular...
Metropolitan liberals.
Exactly, and that's why the Corbynistas hate it too, by the way, because it's not super left-wing, but it is a particular worldview, and I think it's particularly bad at articulating a conservative point of view.
Right, and that's one view. I think probably if you're switching on the telly at home, the other view is that actually, Esther, that actually... already pay for Netflix, I already pay for Sky, people pay for a lot of things, for the things they actually want, and then they also have to pay £157 for some stuff that they probably don't want. So it is in the modern way that people are watching the programmes that they choose to watch. The BBC is becoming a little bit like a dinosaur, isn't it? Just in the way that we all consume our entertainment and news these days.
Never underestimate how greatly loved dinosaurs are. And we can't put them together again. The BBC is deeply loved. Yes, occasionally it annoys us. Yes, occasionally on Today and other programmes you get bullying and belligerent, usually men, who are very discourteous to their interviewees, and that annoys me and it annoys them. So
and they also pay enormous amounts of money to big stars, and we all have to pay for that, and people, I think, find that quite annoying.
OK, here's the solution. Keep the licence fee, please, because people watch by accident and find something of real value. The reason I studied English literature was, as a child, I heard a radio version of Pride and Prejudice, and I adored it. Every night, I now go to bed with the most amazing comedian called Mark Steele, who I discovered by accident. And Mark Steele's in town, one of the perfect bits of comedy. Look at Fleabag. It came up from BBC Three. If this planet survives... if it will be due to two words, David Attenborough. And David Attenborough spent his career...
And there are programmes that no other channel could afford to make apart from the BBC.
Precisely.
And that is true.
Precisely so.
Netflix? The Crown is the most expensive programme ever, and that's a Netflix programme. I just don't think that's true. And also, the time at which one could only experience these things via the BBC, I think that time has passed. The landscape is so much more pluralistic than it once was that I don't think the BBC now has a monopoly on that.
So it's a question, isn't it? You either subscribe... So if they want to scrap the licence fee, but we want to keep the BBC, because those two things you could have, scrap the licence fee, and so then it's a subscription.
Would that
is it a subscription only?
You can't...
Or is it advertising on...
At the moment...
Do you open it up to advertisers?
At the moment, you can't do subscription anyway. It's pie in the sky, because actually you can't stop preview, and you can't stop the radio. So
there are 18 million people, I don't think, have broadband, so you couldn't... Yes, you're right, you couldn't
can't
make
do
it
And in
only.
fact, what the BBC does, in its peculiar, eccentric way, is take risks. So The Crown is not the riskiest drama you ever heard, is it, frankly?
No,
looking at that plot.
There's plenty of dramas that are far more risky than The Crown. I'm just using that as an example of one that was very well funded.
Let's just throw in a statistic the BBC are very fond of, that Rani was reminding me of in the break. They would say that, look, this piece of paper that allows you to watch television and you get sent to jail for if you don't pay it, is costing you 40p a day. And for 40p a day, you're getting a multiplicity of services and diversity. That's true, isn't it? I mean, you looked at it from that perspective.
It's actually quite good value in many ways.
If it's that good value, then why does it need to be done on pain of imprisonment if it's so brilliant and if we love the BBC so much?
Do you agree? Because I do. I think it's ludicrous that people should go to jail for not paying their...
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a problem there, isn't there? Because nobody pays money if they can get away with it, and the cost of the BBC going to court is huge too. So it is a peculiar anachronism, I agree. But if you have a look for a moment at what it costs you to go to the theatre, for example, I was looking at tickets for Mary Poppins. £210 to be in the stalls, £162 to be in the stalls. Whereas, as you say, you get radio, you get television, you get online stuff from the BBC all the year round. Why don't these fat cats, these people that are paid huge sums to have regular, for example, Sunday morning programmes on Radio 2, why don't they go out into the... You're laughing? Why don't they go out into the community and sell the BBC? Mr. Dominic Cummings likes three-word slogans, doesn't he? So why don't they go out with a three-word slogan, which is Save the BBC? Just go out there, you Graham Nortons, you Gary Linekers, you Vanessa
Well, I
Feltz.
think they do, but I think actually, I mean, I've got, you know, lots of young nephews and nieces, and they, if you ask them, they certainly don't want to be paying £157 because they literally, I don't think, unless maybe they might listen to a bit of One Extra every now and again, or a bit of BBC Asian network, you know, or whatever it might be, and they might click on the BBC website every now and again. But they would say they would rather live without all of that than have to pay £157 because they'd rather watch stuff on Netflix.
So you're saying it's inevitable.
And they follow on social media the people they want to follow. I mean, in a marketplace, the BBC's model doesn't work.
They will get older. They will depend upon it, like people of my age
thing
do.
is, I think local radio is the one thing that they should get. I used to work for local radio, and when we've got floodings like this, up in Cumbria and parts of the world, BBC local radio does an absolutely unrivalled service.
And when you talk about loneliness,
informed.
for example, which is the thing that I'm concentrating on at the moment, the people who ring me up and talk to me about loneliness are local radio stations, and the people who depend on them and listen to them.
Can I ask one question about motive here? You want to save the BBC for the reasons that you've
in the exact form it is
discussed. Yeah, and
hang
on, just a minute. You want the BBC to be pared down and basically taught a lesson for the reasons you've described.
No, I don't. I think the BBC could thrive as a subscription model. I think it could go from strength to strength, and in some ways the licence fee has been a bit of a straitjacket.
My point is this. Your arguments aren't actually political and they're not self-interested. The government wants to tame the BBC, I would suggest, because they don't like it, because it doesn't like them.
I don't think Boris wants to. I think Boris cares about his legacy. He doesn't want to be known as the man that destroyed the BBC.
Yeah.
I think there's someone called Benedict Cumberbatch in Number 10. Sorry. Dominic Cummings. And I think he may be the person.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's saying here Robert Halfon, the Tory MP and former minister, suggested that there should be a referendum on the future of the BBC.
God,
Licensing
save us
payers
for a referendum.
should be given...
Have we learned nothing?
should be given control.
No.
That you could... I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that I do think that the BBC is under a huge amount of pressure to change the way it funds itself, because it does seem a lot of money to a lot of people.
Who wants a referendum? Sorry, who wants a referendum?
Robert Halfon, who's
Robert, please. Referendums lead to two things: national division for years and years, and boat face. Well, another one.
Quite like that name.
But yes, we could rename the BBC BB McBeat. Yeah.